I wasn't supposed to be out in the orchard that morning. It was early October. The kind of cold that settles into your bones before the sun even has a chance to argue about it. The grass was still silver with frost. The sky was that flat, pale gray that Maryland does in the fall. Not threatening, just indifferent. Like the world had clocked in but wasn't really trying. I had been out of work for 3 weeks by then. Not that I knew the worst was still coming. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old. I live on the edge of Harford County, out past where the subdivisions give up and the land remembers what it used to be. My property backs up against an old apple orchard, maybe 4 acres of gnarled, forgotten trees that nobody has tended to in years. The previous owners left it like a secret they didn't bother to explain. No fence between my yard and those trees. Just a line in the grass where the mowed part ends and the wild part begins. That morning I went out there just to walk. Not for any good reason. Not with any destination. Just because the walls of the house had started feeling like they were breathing, and I needed air that didn't belong to my own anxiety. I had my coffee in a travel mug. I had my old Carhartt jacket, the one with the broken zipper I keep meaning to replace. I was maybe 100 yards into the orchard when I heard it. A sound, high-pitched, desperate, rhythmic, like something pulling against itself over and over again. Not a bird.
Help!
Not a cat.
Is anyone there?
Something
Over
smaller.
here?
Something that had been at it for a while. I pushed through the tall dead grass near the far fence line, the frost soaking through my jeans almost immediately.
Easy now.
And that's when I saw him. A
I'm gonna
fox
help you.
pup.
Just stay
Couldn't
still.
have been more than 8 weeks old, maybe less. His coat was that bright rust orange that looks almost fake, like something out of a children's book. Except he wasn't in a children's book. His front right leg was caught in a rusted foothold trap half buried in the grass. Forgotten. Left there by someone who either didn't come back or didn't care to. He was pulling against it with everything he had. His whole small body straining. His eyes wide. His breath coming in fast, visible bursts in the cold air. I stepped closer and I expected him to panic, to scream, to fight harder. But he went still. His eyes found mine. And he just stopped. Like some part of him understood that thrashing wasn't going to help anymore.
I'm not gonna hurt
like
you.
he had decided in that moment to try something different.
I'll help.
I crouched down slowly.
It's okay,
I started
little guy.
talking.
You're all
Low,
right.
quiet words.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Not instructions.
Let me help you.
Not commands. Just sound. The kind of voice you use when everything important is fragile and one wrong move ends it. I told him I wasn't going to hurt him. I told him I knew it was cold. I told him I was going to get him out of there. I'm not sure he understood any of it. But he held still. The trap was old, but the spring was still strong. My palms pressed down hard on both sides until the jaws released, and the pup pulled his leg free. He didn't run.
All right,
He sat there
just
in
let
the
me see it. It's
frost-flattened
not too bad.
grass, maybe 2 feet from me, and looked at
Just
his
a little
leg.
cut, stay still.
Then he looked at me. There was a cut
Shh,
just
it's
above
okay.
his right paw.
All
Not
right, all
bone
right.
deep, but serious.
It's all
The
right.
kind of wound that gets infected
Stay
fast
still.
in cold weather. I took off
I'll
my
help
flannel
you.
shirt. I had
Keep
a
still
thermal
now.
underneath, and I wrapped it loosely around him. He let me pick him up. That's the part one still think about. He let me pick him up.
All right.
I carried him
all
back
right,
to the
just
house through
hold
the
on.
orchard, through the
I've got
yard,
you.
through the
We're
side
gonna get
door
out of
into
here
the
now?
garage. Claire was still asleep. It was barely 6:30. I set the pup in a cardboard box lined with a dish towel. I put a shallow bowl of water next to him. I watched him for a minute. He watched me back. Then I got in the car and drove to the Tractor Supply on Route 40 and sat in the parking lot until they opened at 8, then bought antiseptic, gauze, and a small syringe for flushing the wound. When I got back, he was still in the box, still watching the door. I cleaned the wound as carefully as I knew how. He held still through all of it. His breathing was fast and shallow, but he didn't snap, didn't fight. Just watched my hands with those amber eyes like he was trying to figure out what kind of creature I was. By the time Claire came into the garage in her
You'll be
robe at
safe here.
7:45,
Try to
I was
rest.
sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor with a fox pup in a cardboard box and gauze on my hands. She stood in the doorway for a long
All right,
moment.
little one.
Then she
Here's
said,
some water.
"I'm not even going to pretend I'm
You'll
surprised."
be all right.
She sat down next to me on the floor
I
and
found
looked
you
at
a
him
safe
for a
place.
while without saying anything.
Thanks.
Then she asked, "What are we going to do with him?" And I said, "Keep him until he's ready to go." She nodded once like that was a complete answer. I called a wildlife rehabilitator over in Bel Air that morning. She told me what signs to watch for, whether he was eating, whether the wound was weeping, whether his gums stayed pink. She said if he was stable and eating, the best thing I could do was let him recover quietly and release him as soon as he was able. Don't let yourself get attached, she said. I said I understood. I named him Rust that same afternoon. Because of his coat, yes. But also because of the trap.
Thanks. Have a good
Because
one.
of the way he looked at the world, like he'd already met some of its edges and hadn't quite decided what to make of them yet. I kept him in the garage for 4 days. By day 2, Claire was the one sitting on the floor with him,
I've got the
talking
supplies.
to him while he ate torn pieces of chicken from
Is
a
it
paper
here?
plate. By day 3, he was standing up on his own and pressing his nose to the baseboards,
thank goodness.
cataloging the garage with
You're
an
safe.
intensity that seemed almost professional.
All right,
On
just a
day
little
4,
sting.
I opened the garage door. He walked to the threshold.
Just a little bit more, you'll
Stopped.
be okay.
Stood there for a long moment looking out
Whimper.
at the yard, at the grass, at the gap between the trees in the distance. Then he turned and looked back at me. Just once. Then he was gone into the orchard. I told myself that was the right ending. Correct. The way it was supposed to go. I told myself I was glad. I mostly believed it. 2 weeks later, they called me into the office at the warehouse. 11 years I had worked at that distribution center in Joppa. 11 years of
I found
early
him in the
shifts,
woods.
of
He's
overtime
hurt.
in December,
Oh,
of knowing
dear.
every corner
Bring
of
the
that
kid
building the
closer.
way you know a house you've lived in long enough to
Hello
stop seeing it.
there. Are
I
you
was a
alright?
shift supervisor, not management.
I won't hurt you.
Not
Just
on
let
a
me
path
see.
toward anything that came
Okay,
with a better
good. Just
title.
stay there.
But I was good at what
Poor
I did.
thing.
Reliable.
It's okay.
The kind of employee that every organization says it values right up
Take
until the
care of
moment it
you.
proves otherwise.
I
The
saw
layoffs
it. It
came
was
down
real.
from
I just-
corporate. Our floor lost 9 positions.
I don't know
I
what
was
to
one
do
of them.
next.
I drove home on Route 40 with the windows down even though it was cold. I needed something moving
I'm
against
ready.
my face. Something that made the air
I
feel
can do
like it had
this.
direction. Claire was in the kitchen when I walked in. She took one look at me. She didn't ask. She just came over and put her arms around me, and we stood there in the kitchen
It's
for
okay.
a while without saying anything
It's
at all.
safe now.
That night, after
This is
dinner,
for you.
after the dishes, after we talked through the practical things, the savings, the timeline, the plan, I walked out to the orchard in the dark. I stood under the bare apple trees and listened to the field. The sound of dried grass moving. A car somewhere on Route 7. Geese far off. Nothing else. I stood there for a long time anyway. The next 3 months were the kind of hard that doesn't announce itself with noise. It was quiet hard. Slow hard. The kind that arrives not in one blow but in small, daily accumulations. Like water finding its way through a wall you thought was solid. Applications sent into silence. The specific silence of a job board that says viewed and then says nothing else for 2 weeks. Savings accounts declining in increments so small you could almost talk yourself out of worrying, until the morning you did the math out loud and couldn't. Claire picked up an extra shift at the elementary school where she worked as a classroom aide. She never complained about it. Not once. She just did it quietly and came home tired and made dinner anyway. That almost made it worse. I started going to the orchard every morning. Not with any agenda. Not looking for anything in particular. Just walking the fence line, checking the grass, moving through the cold air with somewhere to be even when I had nowhere to be. I started finding more traps. Foothold traps, mostly. Old ones, half-buried, covered with dead leaves. Someone had set them along the property line years ago and either
We
forgotten
regret to
them or
inform you your
abandoned the
position
habit.
has been
I
eliminated.
pulled them all up.
I
5 in
understand.
total over the course of 2 weeks. Each one I found, I noted the location in a small spiral notebook. I don't know why. It just felt important to keep a record. To acknowledge that something dangerous had been hidden there and was now gone. On the 43rd day after I lost my job, I found Rust at the edge of the field. He was thinner than I remembered. His coat was less vivid, dulled by the season and the work of surviving. But it was him. I knew immediately by the slight, careful hitch
What
in his
happened?
right front step.
What happened?
A faint
She's gone.
compensation.
No.
A small, permanent echo of the trap. He was standing about 30 feet away, just at the edge of the orchard where the trees gave way to the open grass. He was watching me. I crouched down slowly, the way I had that first morning. He didn't come closer, but he didn't leave. He just stood there and watched me with those amber eyes, and I watched him back, and for a minute neither of us did anything at all. I started leaving food at the fence post closest to the orchard gap that same evening. Nothing elaborate. A piece of chicken. Half a boiled egg. Whatever I had that seemed right. By the second morning it was gone. By the end of the first week, I was certain it was him and not a raccoon or a possum, because on the third day I went out at 5:30 in the dark and waited, and I saw the shape of him
damn
moving
it.
along the fence line in the gray pre-dawn
warned you
light,
about this.
deliberate and unhurried, checking the post the way a person checks a mailbox they've started to trust. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and didn't mind. Either way, he came back the next morning. And the morning after that. By January, Rust was coming to the fence in the daylight. Not close. Never within reach. But present, and on a schedule that matched mine almost exactly, like we had come to a quiet agreement about
Sector
when
7,
and where without
trap
ever
4-5.
discussing it.
Deadfall triggered.
I'd come
Sector
out
9,
at first
trap
light with my
5-1,
coffee and whatever
unsprung.
I'd set
Sector
aside
10,
the night
trap
before,
6-8,
and
live
he'd appear
capture.
at the orchard gap sometime in the first 10 minutes, moving through the grass with that low, efficient foxtrot, and then he'd settle into a watch. We'd just be there together for a while. There's a kind of relationship you can have with a wild animal that has nothing to do with contact. It's built entirely on showing up, on consistency, on proving through repetition
You
that
really
your
here?
presence is not a precursor to
You really
harm.
here?
I think that's what we were building. And I think, though I'm aware of how this sounds, that it was going both ways. I had lost my structure. My days had no edges. No alarm clock that meant something. No reason to be anywhere by any particular time. But every morning I had somewhere to be. The fence. The orchard. The cold Maryland air and a piece of chicken in my coat pocket. In February I had 2 job interviews. One at a freight company in Aberdeen. One at a warehouse operation outside of Towson. Both went well enough that I drove home feeling something close to hopeful. Neither one called back. I found out about the Aberdeen one on a Tuesday afternoon when I called them for a follow-up, and
Looks
the
like it
HR
worked.
contact told me, very politely, that they had gone with another
Looks
candidate.
like it worked.
I thanked her.
Good.
I hung up. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a while. Then I walked out to the fence. Rust was there. Or he came within a few minutes. He stood at his usual distance, watching. I talked. I told him about the interview. About the drive up on Route 40. About how the manager had seemed to like me and how that apparently hadn't been enough. He sat down in the grass and kept watching me. I know he wasn't processing any of it. I know that. But there's something about speaking out loud to a living thing that isn't going to offer advice or perspective or silver linings. Something about just being heard, even if the listener has no idea what you're saying. Claire started calling him my field therapist. I didn't argue with her.
Still nothing.
By mid-February, he was coming within 15 feet of the fence post on the days I was
Just
already
one
there
more, I
when he
guess.
arrived. On the days I came out after him, he'd hold his ground instead of retreating. That was new. That was earned. I kept a spiral notebook. Not just trap locations
telling you,
anymore.
Claire,
Dates.
it just isn't
distances,
adding up anymore.
behaviors. I'm not sure what I thought I was going to do with the information. Mostly I just wanted a record of something that was growing. March came in gray and wet, the way March in Maryland almost always does. The interviews kept not turning into offers. The savings kept declining. Claire didn't say anything about it, but I started noticing her doing small calculations in her head at the grocery store, holding something for a second, then putting it back on the shelf without comment. I started cooking more. Not because I had some sudden passion for it. Just because it was something I could do well that saved money and filled time and produced a result I could
21st
point
of
to.
May,
Rust was coming within 10 feet by the
observation
last week of
confirmed
March.
at 150
Spring came
meters.
slow that year. The way it always does in Harford County. Testing the air, offering 2 warm days and then
I
pulling
think it
them
went
back.
well.
Retreating into
It really
gray
felt right
skies
in
and
there.
40-degree mornings that felt
I
like
understand.
a broken
Yeah.
promise. By mid-April,
Yeah,
the
no, I
apple
get it.
trees
Thanks
in
for
the
letting me
orchard
know.
were finally starting to
Okay.
show the first pale
All right, take care.
suggestions of blossom. Not open yet. Just the idea of them. And Rust had stopped coming to the fence. I noticed after 3 days. Told myself it was normal. Told myself that foxes have territories that shift with the season, that the pressure of spring changes patterns, that this was expected and correct. I kept leaving the food anyway. A week passed. The food sat untouched for 2 mornings, then disappeared on the 3rd, then sat untouched again for 4 days straight. Something else was coming for it. A raccoon maybe. Or one of the several possums
the
I'd seen
Songos.
moving through the yard at night.
I've been carrying this
Not
for too
Rust.
long. I
2
just need to
weeks
say it
without a
out
sighting.
loud.
Claire said
Anyone
it
who'll
carefully,
listen.
the way she does when she's
I don't know
offering
why I
something
feel
she
this
thinks
way.
I might not
Just,
want to hear. Maybe he's
tired.
found a territory of his own. A
You
mate.
understand, don't
That's
you?
what was supposed to happen. I said that was probably right. I said I was glad for him. I kept going to the fence every morning anyway. Not with expectation. Just out of
Thank
habit.
you, old friend.
Out of something I didn't have a good word for.
Until
And
next
then on a
time.
Tuesday morning in early May, the 5th I think, though I'd have to check the notebook, I came
You're
out
home.
at 6:15
Yeah.
with my coffee. The orchard was in half-light. The blossoms were fully open now, that pale pink-white that only lasts a week before it falls. I stopped at the edge of the yard. Rust was at the fence. I hadn't seen him in almost 3
Didn't eat.
weeks. But it wasn't just him. Behind him, in the gap
Didn't take
between
it.
the nearest apple trees, moving in that low, tentative crouch that very small things use when they're new to the world, were 3 cubs. Round-headed, bright-eyed. Their coats
the
still
spider.
carrying that juvenile softness,
You didn't
that rust
come.
and gray that would sharpen later into something more defined. They were
I guess
watching
this is
me.
goodbye then.
All 3 of them, side by side in the damp orchard grass, watching with the absolute focus that foxes carry from the moment they open their eyes. Rust looked at me. Then he looked back at them. Then he looked at me again.
It's gonna be okay.
And I understood what was
I don't
happening.
know if I believe that.
I don't know if I can
Just
explain
take
it
my
better
hand.
than that. I understood what he
I
was doing.
understand.
I sat down in the wet grass right there at the edge of my yard, coffee still in my hand, and I just looked
need
at
a
them for a
minute.
long time. The cubs stayed close to the orchard gap. One of them took 2 uncertain steps forward before stopping. One of them sat down and scratched at its ear with a back foot in a motion so ordinary it made me laugh out loud, which startled all 3 of them back a step. Russ didn't move. He just stood at the fence between them and me, steady, patient, neither retreating nor advancing, showing me something. I don't have a clean explanation for what I felt sitting in that wet grass at 6:15 on a May morning in Maryland. It wasn't just surprise. It wasn't just joy, though it was that too. There was something older than both of those things. Something that arrived in the chest before the brain had a chance to sort it into a category. I thought about the morning in October when I'd heard that sound in the orchard. I thought about pressing that trap open with both palms in the cold, about
I
the small
recognize it.
warm weight of him wrapped in my flannel shirt, about his eyes finding mine and the
Oh,
deliberate,
my God, I
improbable choice
recognize
he'd
it.
made to go still. I thought about the 43 days, the fence post, the notebook, the winter mornings when showing up to that fence was the only thing that had
Look,
clear edges in my day.
They're back.
I thought about how trust gets built, not in grand
Wow.
moments, not in single
are
acts, but in
beautiful.
the quiet
Yes.
accumulation of consistency, in showing up without agenda, in being present when there was nothing immediately in it for either party. And here was Rust, standing at the fence he had spent a winter learning to approach, with 3 new lives behind him that he had apparently decided were safe to bring here. To this spot. To me. I got a job offer
there he
12
is.
days later. Not at a
I
warehouse.
thought I heard you out here.
Not in freight logistics on the scale I'd been searching in. A smaller company, a regional logistics and supply coordination firm based in Bel Air, maybe 20 minutes from my house. Better hours. A manager named Marcus who, during the interview, had leaned back in his chair and asked me what I did to stay grounded during difficult stretches. I told him the truth. I told him I walked a fence line every morning. That I had a routine I kept regardless of whether there was a practical reason for it. That I'd spent a winter learning that showing up consistently to something, anything, was its own
I
kind of
understand,
anchor.
Marcus.
He
I
nodded
didn't know about
slowly.
the Cubs until 12
He
days
said,
ago.
"That tells
We're
me
talking about
something
fraud,
about
Mark.
how you'd handle
No,
this
this is
role."
my fault, but I was
I
unaware.
started 2 weeks later.
You have to
The
consider
transition
that
back into structure
not
was
everyone
stranger than I
starts with the
expected.
same opportunities.
Not unwelcome.
That's a
but
crucial
strange.
part of the
Like a
equation.
body remembering how to
I
move
have the numbers
after a
right
long
here.
time of
It's a
stillness.
solid investment.
The alarm clock
I
meant
appreciate
something
your
again.
thoroughness.
There were
I
people
just need to be
expecting me to be
convinced it's the
somewhere.
right fit.
There was a rhythm. I still went to the
I-
fence every morning. Earlier now to make it fit before the
I
commute.
think I finally have a chance.
5:45, 5:50, whatever it took. Rust brought the Cubs 3 more times in May. By the 3rd visit, the boldest of the 3, a female based on her build, had made it to within 8 feet of the fence post before retreating. I wrote it down. Summer moved through Maryland the way it always does, thick and insistent, turning the orchard into something lush and overgrown and full of sound. The Cubs grew fast. Within 2 months they were nearly indistinguishable from Rust in size, though their movements were still looser, less calibrated. They hadn't yet developed that particular economy of motion that adult foxes carry, that sense of having decided exactly how much energy each action is worth. Rust kept his distance. That was right. That was how it should be. He wasn't a pet. He wasn't domesticated. He was a wild animal who had
Bold
made a
female,
choice
8
repeatedly
feet,
to
May
exist
3rd
in
visit.
proximity to me, and the terms of that
Calm,
arrangement
but
were
assertive.
entirely his.
Good sign.
I understood that. But he came. Consistently. And he
All right.
brought them.
Time
There's
to
a
head
line
back.
between a relationship and a possession, and I think the only way you can really have the first is if you're completely clear it's not the second. Whatever Rust and I had built across that fence line over the winter, it was real specifically because neither of us owed the other anything. He could have stopped coming after the leg healed. He could have stayed away when the winter got hard. He could have taken his cubs anywhere else in those 4 acres of orchard. He didn't. I thought a lot about what it means. Not in a mystical way. Not in a the fox was my spirit guide way, because I'm not wired for that and I don't think it's accurate anyway. I think it means something simpler. I think it means that small acts of care matter even when there's no obvious return on them. I think it means that trust is patient, and that patience is something you can practice. I think it means that the instinct to help something in pain, even something small, even when it costs you a flannel shirt and a trip to Tractor Supply at 7 in the morning, that instinct is worth following.
To inbound.
That winter asked a lot of me.
We're all set.
I won't say otherwise.
All right, everyone, back to work.
It asked things of Claire that she gave without complaint and that I still think about with a kind of gratitude that doesn't have a matching expression. It asked things of my sense of myself, of who I was if I wasn't the person who showed up reliably to a job, who contributed a specific thing to a specific system. The fence helped with that. Not because a fox is a substitute for self-worth, but because showing up to something every morning, maintaining a commitment that nobody else could see or measure or validate, turned out to be its own form of proof. Proof that I was still here, still consistent, still capable of being trusted by something that had no reason to extend that trust easily. It's October again now. Almost exactly 1 year from the morning I walked into the orchard with my coffee and heard that sound in the frozen grass. The apple trees are loaded this fall. Gnarled old things, unpruned and untended, but productive in the way that things are when they've been left to their own logic long enough.
Looks like it's coming together
I picked
nicely.
some of them last weekend, filled 2 buckets, brought them inside and made something close to a pie, following a recipe off my phone, doing an acceptable job of it. Claire said it was good. I think she meant it. I went out to the fence this morning at 5:40. The sky was that same flat pre-dawn gray. The grass was silver with the first frost of the season. Rust was there. He comes most mornings still, though not every one. He has his territory, his patterns, the logic of a life I only partly get to observe. The 3 cups, they're yearlings now technically. Full grown by the standards of their species. They range further. They don't always come with him. But this morning they were all there. All 4 of them. Rust at the fence post. The 3 at the orchard gap behind him. I crouched down. I put the food at the base of the post the way I always do. The bold one, the female who had been first to close the distance all those months ago, came forward and took it while I was still crouching there, and I held perfectly still, and she paused for 1 second less than 2 feet from my hand, and then she was gone back into the trees. I stayed crouched in the frost for a moment after they left, thinking about the notebook, about the 5 traps pulled from the ground, about the spiral of a year that had looked, from inside the middle of it, like it might not resolve. It resolved. Not neatly. Not the way a story resolves when someone is in charge of the ending, but the way real things resolve, messily, partially, with loose threads still hanging, but with enough ground underfoot to stand on. I still don't know what Rust understood that October morning when he went still in that trap and let a stranger pick him up. I don't know what calculation, if any, was happening behind those amber eyes. But I know what I understood. I understood that something needed help and I was there and I could give it. And I know that 12 months later, on a cold morning in Maryland with frost on the grass and apple blossoms long gone and a job I drive to every day that feels like mine, I walked back across my yard and made breakfast and got ready to go to work. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like a person who had been tested by something real and had not looked away. That's what the fox gave me. Not magic. Not a miracle. Just the long, patient proof that showing up matters. Even when nothing answers.